Welcome back to Motorcycle Ride and our Sportster Tourer build. This is going to be part 3 and the last part. I basically tried to reduce the vibration in the engine going down the highway by swapping out motor mounts, and once we got them out they were definitely worn out. So it should make a big difference, so I haven't been able to test it yet because the bike is still all apart because of the stuff we're doing in this video. We're going to be working on lighting and adding power to it. Or electrical power, I should say. Now, Harley-Davidson, in their infinite wisdom in designing these motorcycles and to extract as much money out of us as possible, decided that this was the best place to put turn signals on a Sportster, which means that anybody that needs to use saddlebags, like on a touring Sportster, well, they have to pay to buy a kit to relocate them back here so that the saddlebags can sit where they should. Huh. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing. I kind of thought I would need access where the wheel is up under here, which is why I left it disassembled. The other thing in this video, and this is something I've been poring over the wiring diagram here, and I think I've found a very unique way to do it that I haven't seen other people do, is I want to add a power port so that I can plug in chargers to charge my cameras, my laptop, batteries, all that kind of stuff that I will be using so I can actually work out on the road besides just traveling. So I want to add that back here so that I can hide it up underneath my luggage rack and I can wire it into my tail bags. And I think I've got a way to do it that's going to be kind of cool. But first, let me show you the parts I got. To do the turn signal relocation, I think I got this from Lowbrow Customs, but basically there are a bunch of different kits out there that do these kinds of things. I bought the kind that has a nice chrome bar that'll fit on the back where the license plate is, so they'll kind of hang next to the license plate, and all the conversion and stuff like that. I am noticing I'm not seeing any wiring in here, though they do have some shrink wrap stuff. So, and this part will go where the license plate is. Voila, like that. Okay, so should be fairly straightforward. I am disappointed. Yes, this is a Chinesium kind of thing. I did buy one of the least expensive ones on the market, so it's probably, all this chrome is probably going to rust like every other Chinese part I did. But it did not come with instructions. So that might be a bit of a challenge from a bad mechanic whose only true ability is to somewhat follow instructions. Then I also bought another very cheap, I think it was $12 or $13 on Bezos' site. And I bought a separate USB-C charger that fits in the cigarette lighter. But I bought this one because it has an on-off switch and it also has fuses on it, which that is going to be redundant now that I've figured out my way to try to wire it up. In order to do my method, though, I did go buy a splitter, which I'm just going to cut up for its parts. Basically, all I ended up. When I first bought this, I thought I would be able to find a port on my bike somewhere that I could just plug into for accessory line and have an extra one running out. But I looked everywhere and I couldn't find anything that would work like this. This is a Harley part that I spent way too much money on. But I am going to end up just cutting these off and using the parts in it because it is somewhat waterproof with these little caps that fit on top of it. And I would like, when I'm going solo, not touring and taking off the backrest, I could remove this and just unplug it in the future. But to make all that work, I had to go buy some electric parts. I did get these from Harley-Davidson, but you can buy them pretty much at any electronic store. And that's just a wire thing that'll go into a plug, which I seem to have lost the plug. Nope, it was on the kitchen table, and this is something I did get from Harley-Davidson, and both of these parts were $4, so it's not a big upgrade. It's not a high cost modification. But let's go ahead and start by working on the turn signals. So I contacted Lowbrow about the missing instructions, and they just said that well, to summarize that, they don't give out instructions because this is a knockoff of the OEM kit. So just use the OEM instructions, and they did send me a link to the Harley-Davidson website where there were instructions on installing their kit. So that's what we're going off of. And I will say they sure do waste a lot of paper. This is 10 pages with a lot of irrelevant information for do this and do that. The tools they say that we'll need are some, I assume, wire stuff and a heat gun, and obviously some screwdrivers and stuff like that. The bar they give you is kind of cool. I guess that's where the wires enter and they go out to the turn signals there. So looks pretty clean. And other than that, we got a single reflector, a rubber thing, I guess some plugs for the turn signals, some wires and stuff like that. So these little covers are plastic, so that's kind of cheap. They do say to avoid accidental startup and probably death, go ahead and disconnect the battery before you do this. Okay, my version has a circuit board in the back tail light. So this is the right turn signal, and that's the left turn signal. So it tells us to go ahead and remove those, just pushing the button and easily pull it out. Left side, right side. Then on both sides, we're supposed to wind the cable out. There's a little clip right there. I'm going to bend it out ever so slightly so that I can safely get this cable out without damaging it. Okay, now we're going to have to cut the wires so that we can get them through the holes. So what they're telling us to do is to cut them about 4 to 6 inches back. So I'm splitting the cover. Now when they cut these, you know, they say take the black back, but don't cut them straight across. You want to cut them kind of staggered. That way when we reattach them to another wire, the crimping mechanism won't be lined up against each other. So it'll fit into the shrink wrap. So do it about 4 and 6 inches is what they said. Kind of like that. Now this bolt's kind of weird. It looks like this is the top of the bolt and it extends out threads on the other side. So, you know, this was what was holding on the turn signal. So it twists together, which I assume I put a wrench on this side and there's a nut on that side that, as you saw, it'll come out, but it looks like that's what's holding on the fender. So I need to get just a bolt that I can put through here so that the fender will stay on. That wasn't in the kit. Might be why it was so cheap. To remove the bolt, just get a slight twist and it'll kind of pop itself out. Now we've got to get the wires coming through the screw hole because, you know, there's that hole right there. So I had to get this out, and it says gently pry it out, but I am just not seeing where you pry from. I am at a complete loss here. There is a little O-ring right here, but I'm scared of damaging it. Okay, I figured out on the other one. I went and grabbed me a chopstick, which I'm sure you can use anything, and there's a hole right here that I can kind of wedge it in, and I can push it out from the back. But if you'll notice, that rubber, it's not an O-ring, it's an entire gasket that's behind it, so you don't want to get underneath the O-ring to pull it out. You actually want to somehow pull from here. And that's why this chopstick in behind it, I can kind of slowly add pressure and it kind of moved the other one forward. Or it breaks the chopstick. Try again. There we go. So as usual, chopsticks are an essential part of any toolkit. Okay, now to put it all back together, we want to put the wires through the threaded hole this time. And I'm noticing that I'm not going to be able to get the sheathing through, so you can go ahead and remove all of that sheathing. Okay, with that total sheathing removed, it should be easier to feed through, and it'll still leave room for the threading. Yeah, I think pulling the rubber out of the case, it just pops right out, will be easier to reattach the wires, because first time I had a hard time figuring out how to get it to seat. And just finding that you have to push evenly, otherwise it just doesn't seem to work very well. Just a little bit on each side until it's all the way down. So our goal is to attach it to this bar right here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put a nut right here. This is a locking nut that will secure the light in the correct position. I guess I'll put this on here, and then I've got to thread the wires through. A little trick I've learned over the years is, if you're having to do it, if you kind of bend the end of the wire like that, it puts some pressure on, so as you feed it through, hopefully it will force its way into that hole. But if it doesn't work, we got another trick. So I'll drop this in, and hopefully it just kind of wants to come out like that. So here's the other one. Drop that in, feed it through, and this one's, oh, I got lucky. But if that doesn't work, you can always take something like a zip tie. If you drop it in first, then feed the wires through the zip tie. Feed the wires through the zip tie, and then you can pull the wires out like that. I got lucky this time. So now pull the whole contraption through, and we're going to screw it on. Understand the wires themselves will need to spin as you're doing that one, so just go slow. Don't get too crazy. So I will screw it all the way down. See, that's all the way down, but notice they are not going opposite that right there. So basically back it off until it's in the right direction you want it to go. And that's when you tighten this nut right here up so that it fits. And these cheap plastic covers, they are not that good quality. They don't really fit very well. But I guess that's what you get for buying the cheap version. And with a little pop, we got that assembly done. So now let's go get these installed on the license plate holder. Now, I was looking at this for the longest time, trying to figure out what's the difference between this one and this one. Because obviously we're going to be reusing this, and that's where that long, I mean, they look identical, except for this one has one extra hole drilled right there. So I assume that's where we're putting the wires through. But then this piece right here, well, it covers up that hole. So I'm kind of a bit confused. And we got lucky. There is a hole already drilled in the fender where it should be. Almost as if Harley planned for this accessory to be needed. You know, like to sell stuff that should have already been on the bike from the beginning. Okay, I went through and read through the instructions again. I really couldn't figure out what this was for a while because the screws didn't fit and I was feeling like an idiot, but I figured it out now. But one thing for sure is they did not put a hole here, and they did that on purpose. So what they want you to do is mark it somehow. How I'm going to do that one is I'm just kind of eyeballing it straight down here. I'm going to take a Sharpie. I'm going to come to the interior hole, just darken it up. So I have that right there. Now I'm going to take it right where that hole is. I'm just going to cut an X. That will let the cables feed through, but keep it a little bit watertight because water's going to be coming off the rear tire on this. So hopefully this will work. So the cable wires can come through like that, and we can close it up somewhat. Okay, this will be the third time I've done this. Each time I think about it, I think of something I'd rather do differently. So right now, I'm looking at this. I'm seeing my cables right here coming through, and they need to go through the hole that we cut. But the thing is, I could see water and everything getting in those. So I think what I want to do is I want to put enough shrink wrap on it to get it to that point right there, and push some of the shrink wrap up inside here. So that means I'm going to cut off this much and slide it on. So it turns out this stuff isn't really shrink wrap. Oh, well, that's what the package says it was, but once again, I did buy the cheap one. But either way, I do think it will be somewhat abrasion resistance for this hole right here, so I'm going to cut off another small bit and get it shoved into the hole. So now we're going to slide this here. I think I want this behind. Get the cables through the hole. There we go, finally. So now I got to feed them through, and one thing I need to note is that this side is longer, this side is shorter, so that should help me keep them differentiated. Otherwise, you need to put some blue tape on the end of these. And nuts on the back to hold them still, hold it on. Then the top license plate holder. And now we will get the turn signals and their right orientation. Which, that doesn't seem to work, does it? So I've got the nut in there, but it's about as tight as I can make it finger tight. So what I'm going to do is I took both of the nuts off, one from each side. I'm going to thread this one on, and then thread this one on next to it. I'm going to lock those two together. I take this wrench, that wrench, and just kind of lock those two together. And now I can turn on the top one and really seat the bottom one. So that basically turns it into a solid bolt and really make sure it's bottomed out. Then just loosen them up and get back to work. So now we come back to these little wires. Go ahead and get everything prepped for connection. I'm also going to slide this protective hose on this end so that once I connect it to the other side, I can slide it back down. Just because I don't think it'll be, I think it'll be too hard to do it on the smaller side. So now I'm going to take one of these, plug it in, then feed it through this being the left side, which will be the shorter cables, because if we remember, these cables are coming all the way from over here down. This one's a shorter distance. And with that side done, plug in the other side and do the same exact thing. And now the heat gun should melt a solvent or glue inside those pink things and kind of seal up these a little bit. Now I just need to clean off a spot to put the adhesive clips that are going to keep the wires out of the tire. Peel off the backing. Give it a good press. Drop the cables in and close the clamp. When I say close it, I mean really send it over, so those can never come out. So no way a tire is going to hit that. Now I don't want to button this up just yet because accessing the power source is from this area too. Now this circuit board they've been using since the 90s on Harleys and pretty much on all the models out there. I think they stopped using it like late teens or something like that. And basically it's just a method to connect wires, that's all it is. So we have all our inputs, the power, the signal from the turn signals, all that kind of stuff coming in here. We have the left and right turn signal. I believe this is for the brake lights, the running lights and that kind of stuff, flashers. But because they save money and they use this on all models and all international models, they have one open slot right here on the Sportsters. And on a lot of models, this is used to power like that little light at the end of fenders and stuff like that. And in some countries, they need to have an extra brake light elsewhere on the bike. So what it is, it's a 3 pins. You have a ground here, and the middle is your brake light, and on the other side is your running light. So that is power that we can use that only is available when the ignition is turned on. So that's what I'm going to try to utilize here. Just the ground and the running light power. Now, over here, you see this orange and white wire? That is an accessory power wire. So if this doesn't work, we can also splice into that and then either ground to the bike or splice into a ground wire. And this too is only on whenever the ignition is turned on. So you're not going to drain your battery with this setup. At least that's what I hope. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I went to Harley-Davidson and got this part from them. Strangely, both of these come together were like $4. Yet if I went to Amazon to just buy this right here, it was like $12. So this is one instance where Harley actually saved money. And these are the things that attach to the wires that plug into these slots to correspond with that right there. So I need to attach these to whatever cable I'm using. Now when I first started out in the video, I told you I was probably going to cut this up. I kind of reconsidered that, and I went ahead and purchased this right here, which was about $8, and gave me 2 of them. My thinking is one of them I will wire to that circuit board through the switch, and the second one I will splice into this right here so that I can remove this when I don't really need it out there, and then just have a quick connect to connect them, the 2 together. And I picked these right here because of that cap so that they are somewhat watertight. Something to consider when you're wiring this up is the part that's connected to the bike that's actually providing power. You want this to be the negative, because the worst thing that could happen would be you riding down the road and this little safety weather cap pops off. So this is loose like that. And if that was positive, anytime it like touched the metal of the bike, you might get a short right there. Where if it's negative, nothing bad will happen. So strangely, the red cable on this is what goes into that portion right there. So I need to take that into consideration when I'm wiring it. The black is not going to be negative on this. My only real concern is if this is going to be long enough. It's 1 foot. Also, it's 14 gauge, which seems a little bit big for what we're doing here, but it's the smallest size I could get with this weatherproof capping. So first thing I did was I loosened up this bar so that I can gain access to the X cutout through that rubber piece. And this time when I'm putting it back together, the screws get a little bit blue Loctite. Yeah, I'm not quite sure this is going to be enough cable, but we'll go for it anyways. So the idea is this square right here fits into the appropriate thing, and then you kind of lock it down right there so it won't come off. And these, if you notice, they have 2 pinch points. So I will wrap the cable around that one, squeeze that one, and then wrap that around. And then theoretically you were supposed to solder it, but honestly I don't know how to solder. So I'm just going to hope that the pinching it will work good enough. So here we go. Spread that out a little bit. Remember me talking about 14 gauge might be too big. And this might be the point where it shows to be too big. First squeeze it down in there. And squeeze the top one. Okay, that seems pretty tight. I'm sure it could be better, but I'm not an electrician, so just doing our best here. Okay, so I have verified at 2 different spots that the tail light is one on the inside and the ground is on the one on the outside. So the plug goes in like that. So this needs to be the power, that needs to be the ground. And we discussed earlier that I was making the red wire my ground. So I'm going to slide that into the outside slot. And then this one goes in the other side slot. And then on the bottom we have this little clasp thing that's going to click down supposedly. Gotta clean a little bit of the grease out. And then pop it in. Unfortunately, I will not be able to test all this out until I get the whole bike together, and I'm not going to be doing that until I finish a few more parts. So you are just going to have to check back at a later video when I wrap this thing up, see if everything works out. But I have faith. I hope y'all picked up a few tips or ideas. Understand I am not an electrician, and I probably made mistakes, and I would appreciate it if you know what you're talking about, not just hearsay, to leave those comments down below so the rest of us can learn from them. But either way, get out on the road, be safe, have fun, and remember, it's all just a motorcycle ride.